Welcome back to another week of Sambo iRacing. It's week 6, season 1, 2024. We are in the Formula Vee at Chartlotte Motor Speedway for their R.C. Legends Long track guide. And we have taken the time, date, and track information from the schedule. So it is the 1st of April 2024 at midday in the sim. It's a warm 26 degrees out in the air, and it's 42 degrees on the track. This is a very tricky little course with not many overtaking opportunities, although I will hopefully try and put a video in a couple of days into the racing to show where I would be looking to pass and defend on here. Qualifying is going to be very important, so do try and get as much practice in as you can over the weekend or in the day on Monday, because the differential's really going to be there in the first few days when people haven't had that much time to practice on the track. If there's anything else you want to know, let me know in the comments, and I shall see you for our first run through in the cockpit. Thanks a lot. Okay, so here we are over on the left hand side. We're in 4th gear, and what we're looking for is the first braking marker for turn 1, which is going to be the start finish line. And as we get there, we're going to brake briefly up to about 85%. And then as we start turning in, obviously we're going to trail it down. So I'm slowly coming off the brake here. And then when I'm ready to get back on the throttle, I'm going to drop it down into 3rd gear. Not before then. You don't want any engine braking, otherwise you'll lock up your ears. And here, I like to cut this corner as much as possible. So if the very front of your car, the very middle of your car, sorry, where the E is, as you can see, as long as that remains over the white line, you're not going to get an off track here. So it just means you can cut it nice and early, and then I'm fully back on the throttle here at the apex in 3rd gear. I'm just going to let it drift out, holding that steering angle, come out, don't hit the wall on the left-hand side, and now we're moving back over to the right-hand side. So I always come close to these tyres on the right, and what I'm looking for is the next braking marker. There isn't really something obvious, but it's basically, if you look on the left-hand side, you've got the numbers 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, etc. on the left-hand side in the pink, on the pink concrete there. When my car's alongside the 5, I'm going to start braking for this next turn. So turn 2 and turn 12, so the second turn and the second to last turn, are the most important turns on the track, and that's because you are then on throttle for the longest period of time afterwards. So what I like to do again, I've shown you this trick before, is whilst keeping the very centre of my car over the asphalt, you can actually use this grass on the right-hand side. It is still quite grippy, even despite all the changes. So I'm braking roughly up to about 70% there, and I start moving over. And as I do that, obviously, as I start the turn, I'm trail braking it down. You're already in 3rd gear. And what you're looking to do is come completely off the throttle. By coming off the throttle, it gives you that extra rotation of the rear. And I'm looking to just miss these tyres on the left-hand side, start building back on the throttle, so that here we are at the apex, and I'm fully back on the throttle. I'm now going to play it at full speed this next little bit, because your car's going to drift out wide, but as long as you hold that steering angle and you stay in the throttle, you're just going to catch the slide. You're going to be over on the right-hand side, and we're going to start moving back over to the left. Again, we're cutting this as tight as possible without hitting the wall on the inside. We're revving it out in 3rd gear here, so we don't need to go up to 4th. And we're just looking to get as close to the blue sort of inside curbing here as possible. Keep revving it out, and then a couple of car lengths before this line in the middle of the track, we're going to slowly come off the throttle down to about 10%, and then we're just going to feather the throttle, finding out where the grip is, letting go of the throttle a little bit anytime we need some extra rotation. As always, if you look at my steering angle, I'm looking to turn slightly inside the apex because I know it's going to understeer out, and we're just wanting to clip this as close as possible. Again, not touching the blue curbing, but getting as close. We're fully back on the throttle. It's going to come out to the left-hand side, and that's fine. You don't want to touch the grass here, not in the V. And now we start looking for our next turn-in marker for the following turn, for turn 5. So there's 4 Bojangles signs on the left-hand side. So at the 3rd to last one, or the second one that you go past, I'm going to come off the throttle, again, just allowing that rotation of the rear down to about 9% and hold it there. And I'm looking to aim, again, inside the corner. I just want to clip the grass here as best as possible. I'm fully back on the throttle. You'll see it far better on the chase cam and when I run it through at full speed with the driving line on at the end. And we're looking to try and hold it over to the right-hand side as best as possible. So if you look here, I've got about 45-degree steering angle on. I'm now going to move that steering back so I can start pointing towards the apex, so that when I get to the end of this blue sort of asphalt on the left-hand side, I can briefly pop onto the brake up to about 55% and immediately start trailing it off. And I'm looking to cut this as tight as possible on the left-hand side. I'm feathering with the throttle, again coming off every time I need some extra rotation in the rear, and looking again to wait until the rear's coming around, and then I'm going to start going back on the throttle. So I'm at 100% here as I clip the apex for this turn, which is turn 7. In a race, especially in a top split race, you'll often see this cone that's just in front of you gets knocked over time after time after time, and that's because people are just clipping the inside. There's no off track there though. And then as soon as we're out on the right hand side, we need to be turning back into the inside for turn 8. I'm going to briefly dab the brakes up to about 35%, and again try and keep it as close and as tight as possible on the right hand side with feathering the throttle. And we're looking to go back onto the throttle. And if you look here, so I'm actually turning just past 90 degrees on the right hand side. So if you look at this by itself, if I was going at 0 speed and starting off, I would actually completely miss the corner and I'd be driving off on the inside of the netting on the right. But because we've got the understeer, we're fully back on the throttle, but your car's going to just nicely clip this red and white rumble strip. It's not going to hit the blue curbing. You're going to go out over to the left-hand side so that you can open up this next turn. So this is completely fine. There's no off-track for being out here. And what we're looking to do is aim just inside the curb again. We're going to start moving just off the throttle a little bit here, just so that I can get that rotation, so I can make this corner. This is quite bumpy, but again, it doesn't actually slow you down. And once I know, as you can see here, that I'm coming through over to the right-hand side, and then on this Bojangle sign on the left, so I'm going to briefly dab the brakes up to about 50%. Again, trying to keep this turn as tight as possible. I'm actually coasting there for a couple of beats. And we're just looking to feather the throttle, making sure that you're staying on the rumble strip and fully on the throttle now. Coming to the second to last turn, and just as we get to the coloured asphalt, the white and red on the left-hand side, we're going to briefly dab the brakes up to about 60%, trail it off, and then we're just looking to get the rear in the right place so that we're fully back on the throttle. And now we're just on throttle for the remainder of the lap, trying to cut this and keep it as straight as possible. And obviously, as this is for a qualifying lap, you're going to cut it over to the right-hand side as close as possible. If you're in a race, you'd only be doing that if you're running a defensive line. Normally, you'd just be over on the left-hand side to open up turn 1, up to 4th gear, and then across the line for what is a 124.438. So I can tell you now, if you're putting that in qualifying, you're going to be on the front row every time, more or less. Okay, I'll see. Okay, so here we are for a full speed run through so that you can use my input telemetry and see my trail braking. Over on the left-hand side, brake quite hard, trail it off, nice slow trail down to the apex, into 3rd, let it hang out. Don't hit these tyres on the right-hand side, I have done that before, it's very embarrassing. Cutting these, but not hitting on either side. Nice trail brake there, you can see. Revving it out in 3rd, getting close to the blue here, but not hitting it. A nice lift, back on the throttle, again not actually hitting the blue curbing. A turn in here, cutting the corner, don't hit the inside. Quick brake, keeping this as tight as possible. Cutting the inside, again sharp dab of the brakes. Fully back on the throttle. I'm looking for this one, again just a little lift. Power will bounce a little bit, it's not the end of the world. I'm getting on the throttle nice and early here. And now the second most important corner on the racetrack, getting on the throttle as early as possible, and then just revving it out, going up to 4th, and across the line. Not a long lap, but one of the most technical ones on the series. I'll see you back in the cockpit with the driving line on. Okay, now it's time for our final run through with the driving line on. Really important that you don't get the 1x there. You don't want to be any further over to the right than I am. You can see when you go through that at full speed, it is a little bit scary looking. That's why practice is really important this week. It's not one of those tracks like Lime Rock Classic that you can just rock up and expect to be putting it on pole. Okay, as always, thanks for joining me for another week of Sambo iRacing. I'll see you next week for the next guide. Actually, I'll see you next week for a last to first attempt. Cheers.